Today we're talking about how to start an LLC in North Carolina, and what you can see behind me here is a checklist that we're going to be going through that's going to explain this in detail of everything you need to know. And specifically, I want to get into how to avoid the LLC dumpster fire. Now, this is something where you set up your LLC and then all of a sudden 2 or 3 years later, it's not doing what it's supposed to do for you, which is limit your liability. And then you have this massive issue that could potentially cost you tens of thousands of dollars. Now, this happens when you don't understand terms such as piercing the corporate veil, registered agents, commingling funds, pass-through taxation, how the LLC renewal process works, and also business licenses and permits. But before we get into all of these terms, to better understand these, really what you need to know is what an LLC actually does for your business. So that's what we're going to start off first in this video 1 of this series. Now, why don't we click right here and get into the details on this? What we're going to be covering is the fact that an LLC, what it does is it limits your liability because it's a limited liability company. And we're also going to be talking about the fact that it offers pass-through taxation. Now, the easiest way to do this is talking about owning a coffee shop without an LLC. What does that look like? Well, what you can see here is a pretty crude looking image, but basically we have our business owner here in the middle, and in the left-hand side here, what you can see is that they have their personal home, personal car, personal bank account. But then on the right-hand side are the business assets. So the business bank account, the actual cafe, the espresso machine, lights, point of sale machine. All of these things are directly connected to the business owner, which creates a lot of liability because there's no division between their personal and business assets. Now, when you own an LLC that owns the coffee shop, it looks very different. Now you can see the personal assets are on the left side, and then all the business assets are on the right side, and we've called this Acme Coffee LLC. This red division in the middle, this line here, is something called the corporate veil. Now, if you recall, if we scroll up here, we talked about piercing the corporate veil. Why don't we explain what that means right now? Now, let's say that somebody were to get hurt at your coffee shop and they decide they're going to sue you. What the attorney is going to try to do is pierce the corporate veil. Basically, what that means is they try to find a crack in your LLC to say this is not a legit LLC. And if a judge agrees with them, then that division in between the two asset classes gets erased, and then they can come after your business and personal assets. So you can understand why it's so important to make sure that you're dotting your I's and crossing your T's. One of the ways that they will do this is they'll try to go for something called commingling funds, which I want to talk about really quickly. Here you can see that there's a business bank account and a personal bank account. When people run transactions for their business through their personal bank account, that's called commingling funds. And again, this is another example of a crack in your LLC. And then if the attorney that's suing you finds out that you've been doing this, there's a potential that they may be able to pierce the corporate veil and come after your personal assets. So really important that you understand that. One thing too I want to talk about is explaining pass-through taxation. It's not super critical, but a lot of people don't understand this as it pertains to their LLCs when it comes to tax time. Now, let's take Acme Coffee LLC. Let's say you grossed $140,000 and you had $90,000 of expenses and you had a net income of $50,000. The IRS is not taxing the LLC, they're actually taxing the business owner. So that $50,000 of net income flows through or passes through to your tax return, okay? So that's where that pass-through taxation comes from. You'll hear about that. That's what that means, and I just wanted you to be aware of that for when it comes to tax time. Now, I do want to make mention here, there's like a brief mention that you can reduce your LLC taxes, and the way you would do that is through an S-Corp designation, but that is going to be in a future video in this series. There's 2 other videos that we're going to have in this playlist, and super important that you watch all 3 of them because it'll give you a full picture of not only how to set up your LLC, but also how to maintain it, what the right path is for you, if you should use the state website, an attorney, or an online legal tool. And then there's also a bunch of cool bonuses that we're going to get into as well. Now, what I'd like to do is go over this checklist to start your LLC. And now the first thing on here is get this checklist for yourself and explore the bonuses and glossary. This is a free checklist available for you. There's a link in the description below for it. And there's also a QR code on the screen right now. But what I'd like to do is highlight some of the bonuses down here, such as there's an AI chatbot. So this is pretty cool because I could be like, how to start an LLC in North Carolina. You can see I spelled 2 wrong, but it'll probably still pull up. And what this is going to do is help give you a checklist of items that you can look at, but also other things. So it's like, how do I register an EIN, which we're going to explain actually later in this video, but this is just a really cool, helpful chatbot that's going to help you throughout the process. Now, another thing I wanted to mention too is there's a yearly accounting calendar. We'll have a separate video on this. We'll talk about this in the future, but just explaining these LLC dates for you. But you can save that to your phone, make it really easy for you to go through that. And we'll also get into future tax savings, etc. The glossary of terms down here, helpful if I say something that you're unfamiliar with, and we're going to only be adding to this glossary. So just know that this document is going to improve over time as well. Now, decide which route you want to go. State site, LLC Services, or also called online tools, or a business attorney. Those are really your three paths when it comes to setting up your LLC. In the next video, we're really going to deep dive on this in this video. But what I want to do is give you a 30,000 foot view right now. When you use the state website, there are the least amount of upsells, so it tends to be the cheapest route, but there's also a lack of services and features. They don't help you in the local government things that you need to look into. They don't help you with anything that's federal, such as an EIN. It's typically also the most difficult process because they don't do a great job of giving you good support and information as you're going through each step. If you go with an online legal tool, an LLC service, that's where it's the most seamless and easiest process. And it's also great because you have one dashboard for everything, but it can be a little bit more expensive if you start to go into the higher tier packages. And of course, a business attorney is going to be the most expensive, but in certain situations, it may make sense to go through a business attorney and not risk going through an online legal tool or going through your state website. Again, we'll talk about that in a little bit. But in the case of this video, what we're going to do is we're going to focus on the state website and just kind of looking at it like if you go the old-fashioned route of filling out a PDF and mailing it in. So we're going to check that out in a minute. Next, decide on your business name for your LLC. What I'll say for this is a lot of people put a lot of pressure on themselves, like, oh, they need the perfect name for my LLC. Well, you don't really, right? Because the LLC could just be like your name LLC or something pretty, generic, like Acme Coffee LLC. But then you can have a clever brand name that the public sees that lives underneath that. And that is done through something called a DBA, a doing business as, or a fictitious name. Now you might have something like Espresso Yourself Coffee or something like that, right? So I just want to mention this so that you don't feel like there's a lot of pressure to have the perfect LLC name. But what you do need to do is make sure that it's unique within your state. So what I want to do at this point is search availability of your business name. There's a state directory link here. And when we open this up, we're going to scroll down to North Carolina. And when you go to their link, what you can do here is you want to search the company name right here. Select how you want to search. I'm going to say starting with. So if I search the word Tar Heels, obviously this is a name that's probably taken if we look at this database. So what you see is there's like a bunch of different Tar Heel names here. And there's a good chance that you can't have that name. They found 186 matches. Now, if you were to do something crazy and just kind of hit the keyboard like this and I search this is what you want to see. You can notice right here it says records found 0. That's what we're looking for. So that tells us that this is a unique name. Now, what you do once you have your name is you're going to go into the process of actually getting your LLC set up. When you register your LLC name, that is different than filing and writing your articles of organization. The articles of organization is the actual document that you create and you file that with the state that creates an LLC. When you register your LLC name, that is simply like if you have the name and you want to make sure that you can keep it, you can register the name and then file your articles of organization. The easiest analogy for this is like a lot of times people, if they want to start a website, but they don't have the time or resources to build it today, they'll go out and buy the domain just so they can secure that domain. Very similar. But most people are going to start off at writing your articles of organization and then filing your articles of organization with the state. Why don't we click on the state directory list again? And before we go down here and click on North Carolina, what I want to do is just kind of cover right here. These are the items that go into your articles of organization typically, but we're going to actually go into the document itself and take a look. So why don't we click here? We're on North Carolina. And then what you can see is this is a lot of information here, but all I want to do is just highlight a few things here. Number one is the name of the limited liability company is, so that unique name that you have decided upon for your LLC. The name and address of each person executing these articles of organization. So this is, the people that are going to own the LLC. The name of the initial registered agent is. This is where I find the state websites kind of difficult because 3 and 4 are just like, oh, what's your registered agent and what's their address? And they don't really get into the details of what it is exactly. If you're not familiar, a registered agent is a third party that handles important documentation and communication for your business. Now, the reason that they are so important is, let's say in the coffee shop example of you being sued, they're going to make sure that you're getting that service of process notice. So that's like you're being requested to show up at court. They're going to help you dot your I's and cross your T's throughout that process. They also help give you a little bit of distance from your business because the registered agent is in a public database for the business, and that is going to be somebody else's name and address on there, which is really helpful if you are working from home, if you have a home office situation, because then that combined with a virtual mailbox, you have a lot of distance between your home office not showing up in online databases. But it's really important that you have a good registered agent. And what I'd recommend is don't make it somebody that you're like friends with or somebody down the street. There's professional services out there. And in the next video, we're going to talk about how they actually provide you that free registered agent for the first year as well. Now, the mailing address, if different from the street address here, principal office information. Again, if you're just like a home office, you put in your home office information. Of course, you put in the office there. Any other provisions for which the limited liability elects to include, the purpose of the entity are attached. This is optional here as far as listing company officials, and also please provide the business email address. Of course, you can do those things if you want to. These articles will be effective upon filing unless a future date is specified. So this is where this can come into play sometimes if like it's December 1st and you don't actually want the LLC until January. Sometimes people will delay it until January because then it helps them avoid having to renew the LLC for an additional year. And again, renewing LLCs, that's going to be something we're going to talk about in the third video of this playlist. So at the bottom here, you can see that the filing fee is kind of small, is $125. And then what you can do is mail this completed document to the Secretary of State. But most people, I would just recommend creating a login with the state website and doing everything online. But just know that there's no way of getting around that $125 fee. If you go through the state website, an online legal tool, or a business attorney, you're going to pay $125 to the Secretary of State for setting up your North Carolina LLC. Now, once you have this all set up and you go through and let's say you decide to go this route and you've assigned a registered agent, what you may want to consider is creating and signing an LLC operating agreement. Now, it is not required to do so in North Carolina. There are only 5 states that require that upon setting up your LLC, but it's always a good idea. And what I like to say is it's an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. And that's what this situation is. The reason for that is, let's say that you did have a partner setting up that coffee shop and you go big. You end up having 20 locations someday, right? Well, if your partner, life changes, whatever happens, they want out of the business. How do you handle that situation? Well, typically what happens if you don't have an operating agreement that spells that out already, what you're going to do is you're going to have a lengthy legal battle that can cost you tens of thousands of dollars trying to figure out what that person's entitled to upon exiting the business. That's where, again, just having that operating agreement in place can help put out those future fires and make things much easier when you spell it out day one. What I want to talk about now is after LLC formation, some things to consider. We have setting up an EIN here. This will kind of explain this for you, but basically an EIN is an employment identification number, and it's like a social security number for your business. It's a way of the IRS being able to identify your business. Typically, you would need this in situations where you're putting somebody on payroll, so you'll need an EIN for that, but it also helps to legitimize your business in situations like you're applying for a business loan or business insurance, or perhaps you're opening up a business bank account. A lot of times they'll ask you for your EIN number, and that's the more official number that you can provide as opposed to putting in your social security number. So I highly suggest getting this set up as soon as possible. It is free to do it through the IRS website, but you can also go through the online legal tools and have them help you set it up as well. Now, once you get that EIN set up, you're going to want to look into obtaining business licenses and permits for your LLC. Now, there's an SBA resource here that can walk you through this, which is pretty helpful. But what I want to do is explain this through a hypothetical. Let's say that you are actually starting a brewery. Well, you're brewing beer, you're distributing beer, and maybe you're serving beer in your location. Now, those are 3 different things that may all require licenses and permits, and those can happen on the federal level, the state level, and the local government level. So it could be even your town or city that you live in has certain licenses and permits that are required to be able to do that. You'll see this as well in a lot of different industries like chiropractic. Maybe you're opening up a construction firm. There's many different business categories that require these additional licenses and permits to operate. So I just wanted to make you aware of that. Now, what we're going to be talking about in the next video here is we're going to be going into the fees associated with setting up your LLC. So down to the dollar, what does it cost not only today, but in year 5? And we have a cool calculator that's embedded on this page that we're going to show you how that works. We're going to get into these star ratings of comparing your 3 different options as far as going through the state site, online tools, and attorneys. We'll also talk about why state websites become a pain. If you're not familiar, there's domestic LLCs and foreign LLCs. We're going to explain exactly what that means and why it becomes a problem for you sometimes when you're using the state website. And then also looking at questions worth asking. So when does it make sense to go with a business attorney? We're going to deep dive on all those topics in the next video. And again, I'd highly suggest you get this Notion document. There is a free link in the description below to grab that. And then I'm going to catch you in the next video for exploring different options for forming your LLC.